All right, so subpart 1 starts off with two complex numbers being multiplied by each other. And so what you want to do is go ahead and just do like the double distributive property. All right, and then some of you might have noticed this answer choice isn't there. There's a couple of things we need to do. One of them is combine those i's, and I think you probably knew that. The other thing you need to do is remember that I squared is -1. So when you have minus 6i squared, that's like -6 times -1 or +6. And then when you add 8 and 6, you're going to get 14. So the answer is D. All right, and then we have Fanny's blanket. So we have this rectangular blanket, and the length is 10 inches greater than the width. So we want to write a function that describes the area of her blanket. And when you do the area of a rectangle, it's length times width. So if you call this anything, you need to call it what they called it, which is f of w. And then we're going to multiply the length times the width. Okay. And then for number 3, we want to figure out what the remainder is when that function is divided by x minus 3. And we're going to do synthetic division where we're going to put the opposite of this in the box. And then we'll bring over the coefficients and the constant. Leave a space, draw the line, drop down 1, and then just multiply and add. Multiply and add. Multiply and add. And all we want is the remainder. This very last number is the remainder. Okay. And then we want to know which is equivalent if we took 4x plus 6y and multiplied it by itself. Okay, so we can go ahead and kind of eliminate a couple of answers. Obviously, it's not this one or this one because we got 16x squared and 36y squared, and that was just the 4 and the 6. So we need to decide between R and S. And so I do know that 4 times the 6 is 24. And I also know I got that twice. So the answer is going to be R. All right. And then anytime you raise something to the 1/2, that means that you're taking the square root. All right, number 6 is one of the most difficult ones on here. So x to the 6th minus y to the 6th is the difference of squares and the difference of cubes. But what we're going to do is start off and just factor it using the difference of squares. All right, now that's not an answer choice because these both can be factored again. So the first one is the sum of cubes, and the second one is the difference of cubes. So when we do the sum and the difference of cubes, you have a small set of parentheses and a large set. Right? Inside the small set, you find each root and you bring it down with the sign. So the cube roots of each of those are just x and y, and you bring it down with the sign. And then you square the first one, change the sign, multiply them together. The last sign is always a plus, and then you square the second one. All right, the difference of cubes, I'm going to say the exact same words. So you have a small set of parentheses and a large set. You find each root and you bring it down with the sign. Then you're going to square the first one, change the sign, multiply them together. The last sign is always a plus, and then square the second one. All right, so we're looking for which one of these matches. Now, obviously, it's not A or B. So look very closely in C and D, and it's going to be C. Now, they're out of order, but you're multiplying, so it's fine. But we have all of the different parts. So that's it. Right. Number 7 also is not super easy to do without a calculator, but what you're going to do is cross multiply. All right, then we'll just do all the distributing. All right, and then this is a quadratic equation. So we're going to get everything on one side, and then we're going to factor it. Now, this also is not an easy one to do without a calculator, but it is on the non-calculator portion. Now, hopefully you recognize that 3 divides evenly into all of those. So I'm going to divide through by 3. All right. And like I said, this is not super easy to do without a calculator. And I'm out of room, so I'm going to continue here. So we're going to factor normally. So I know it's going to be x and x. And then because this last sign is a minus sign, then I know these are going to be opposite. So 1 plus and 1 minus. And then I'm going to multiply to get 18 and subtract to get negative 3. So that's going to be a 3 and a 6. And since I want negative 3, I want the 6 to be negative. All right, we're getting close. Okay, so now I'm going to set each of these equal to 0. Now that doesn't mean that these are both answers. So if I plug these in and it gives me 0 in the denominator, then it's not an answer. So if I put negative 3 here, negative 3 plus 3 is 0. So that is an extraneous solution. So we don't list it. But 6 is fine. When I put 6 there, I'm going to get 9, and then I'm going to get 25 in the denominator. So 6 is perfectly fine. All right. On number 8, you're definitely going to want to use the reference sheet on this one. And so on the reference sheet, there's a compound interest formula. Can't remember exactly what the variable on the left is, but what's important is what's on the right. So it's on there, but you still need to know what all the things are. So P is going to be the principal, or what you're depositing. R is the interest rate as a decimal. So we would take that decimal, move it over 2 places. All right. Quarterly has to do with N. Compounded quarterly means 4 times per year. So N is 4. Okay, so I'm gonna call this what it tells me to call this, which is J of T. So we enter our P, the R, n, and t is going to be the variable. That was probably difficult to type in on that Google form, but it's possible on the real test you'll have to type stuff in. All right, and then for number 9, we are just going to find the square root of all of those things. So the square root of 16 is 4, so we can forget about r and s. When you take the square root of a variable, you divide the exponent by 2. So whatever this index is, you divide that by 2. So that's going to be a squared. When I take 6 and divide it by 2, that's going to be x cubed. Okay, and then number 10 is kind of tough. A formula to determine pH is given its hydronium ion concentration is that formula where X is the hydronium concentration and Y is the pH of the solution. So we want to solve this equation for X. And so we're basically going to do the loop. And so the base of log with no base is 10. So you could, if you really like doing the loop, you could rewrite it this way. Now that negative, before we do the loop, we need to get rid of that negative by dividing both sides by -1. Okay, and then when we do the loop, we're going to go around. So it's 10 raised to the -y is equal to x, which matches up with D.